This is Dear Jane block number G08. It's one of the more traditional ones, so you can see it's an 8-pointed star. Now, traditionally, it would have been done with the star points being diamonds, and then a whole square here and a whole triangle here. But that gives you an inside seam in 2 different places, which is a bit tricky to do. So if you're going to actually convert this to an FPP pattern, what you end up with is something like that. I'll get it all on the screen. But this is our diamond, and then we've split the triangle that was on the side and the square into 2 separate sections. That does away with the inside seam. This particular pattern I didn't make. It was by a lady called Susan Gatewood, and I'll be linking her website, which offers free patterns for every single one of the Dear Jane blocks, including the edges and the triangles for the corners. But yeah, this one I'm going to do in my blue scraps and white. Let's go. So the first thing I've done is I've put some highlighter on to remind myself where the colour needs to be. And then I'm going to cut this out with some paper scissors. There is a 1/4 inch seam line on here. It's very, very difficult to see on camera. So I'm going to cut slightly outside that, just roughly, because that won't matter. And I'm going to end up with eight sections that look a little bit like that. See you in a moment. Now for the next stage, I need some cardboard that's got a straight edge. This is part of a grocery packet, but something like a postcard will also do. And I'm going to go through, and on all of these, I want to put the cardboard down and then fold on the line and separate the sections, so I get a really good crease. Because when we do foundation paper piecing, we're going to be looking at the back side when we're positioning our fabric. We sew from the front, we sew on the line, which makes it nice and easy, but we do all the positioning from the back. And if I fold on all the lines, including edges, then I'm going to be able to see how to position my fabric properly. My folds on there. I'm going to repeat that with the other 7 pieces. Okay, so here we go. I've got a scrap of blue and I've got a scrap of my cream colour. I'm going to need some pins. And I'm going to grab one of my sections. Now, on here they've got numbers. So let me just, you see that? That says B1, B2, B3. You can start with the blue diamond or the small square or the big square. It really doesn't matter. And for example, this one has started with the small one as B1, whereas this one has started with the big one is G1. And if I go to A, the coloured section is number 1. It doesn't matter really which ones you start with. It's not one of these intensely complicated patterns where it's crucial which one you do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my coloured piece on first, and I want it to be positioned over my blue. Sorry, positioned over my coloured section. I want to make sure that I've got 1/4 inch all the way around. Now when I folded it, I haven't done the edge, which is a good start, isn't it, from the one I grabbed. There we go. When I folded it, I can see where the edges are, so that when I'm positioning this on the back, the plain back, I should be able to see that that is the point that I need to cover, and those are the sides that I need to cover. So when I put my piece on, I know that I've got full coverage all the way round, all the way up past that point, all the way past the other point, and 1/4 inch down this side, 1/4 inch down that side. That's good. So I'm going to get a nice flat pin. Put my pin in there. I put my pin on this side so that I can see it, because when I sew, I'm going to be able to remove that, because this side is going to be up when I sew. This side is going to be underneath. Next thing to do is decide which of these I'm going to do. Am I going to do the small triangle or the big triangle? Look at my scraps of what I've got actually. That's quite a nice big one. I'll take that scrap. Okay, if I decide that I'm going to do this space between the diamond and the small triangle, I fold that over. Okay, trim away the excess. So I put my 1/4 inch line up to the edge of the paper. Trim my blue. I can now flip that back over and line my scrap, that is my other colour, up with that edge. I just want to make sure that when I flip it back, I'm going to have coverage, which I will. I'm going to pin that turn it over. Are those two still aligned? Yes, they are. Whoops. Pin that through both layers. So I've got white and the blue together. I've got 2 pins on the top, and this is the seam that I'm going to sew down, because that's the one where I've lined up the 2 fabrics. Okay, so this is the line I'm going to sew down, and I place that under my machine. I'm actually going to start about 1/4 inch past it into the seam allowance. I want to position my foot so that the split in the presser foot is directly on the line. I might need to remove that pin in a moment. I'm watching where my pins are, that's why they're on the top, so that I can see. And then we literally sew down the line. Pause for a second and take that pin out, because I don't want the presser foot to be pushed sideways. And in this case, I can sew all the way off the edge, and it'll be fine. So there we have it. This is the end I started on, this end here. I've started a little bit into the seam allowance, gone all the way across, so I've made sure I covered the entirety of the seam, and then I've just gone off the other side because I'm not bothered about the seam allowance. What I can do now is on the back, I can remove that first pin because I don't need that anymore. And when I press it upwards, you can see I've got the 2 pieces together. My next piece is going to go here on the other side of that diamond. So the first thing I'm going to do is head over to the iron this piece, and then I can position the next one. So here's the piece that I've just sewn. You can see I've left this long piece on here because it's not interfering with anything. I'm going to flip that back over. I now want to fold between this piece and this piece because this is the next piece I want to put on. And I just rip any sewing lines that are there. I can just rip the pattern so they will line flat. Okay, that's now nice and flat. We want to trim that to 1/4 inch, and as you can see I haven't got an awful lot there to trim off. That's good. There was enough coverage there. I now want to look and find a piece that will be this size but a little bit bigger. I think I had that one there, didn't I? That one's a good one. That's well over. So I'm now going to position that at this end. I'm going to hold it up and make sure I can see through the fabric to the pattern, or use the seam lines. I've got more than 1/4 inch on this end, and I've got more than 1/4 inch on this end. So I need another pin. Pin this in. Okay, there we go. This is the next sewing line from here all the way down to there. Here we go, this is what I've sewn. I've started a little bit past that line there, and I've continued again a little bit past that line there. That's going to help hold this together in a second. Remove the pin. Go and iron it. Let's get it so you can actually see. So here we are, all pressed and all flat. So I'm going to turn it over to the printed side, get my ruler, line the 1/4 inch up onto the solid line there, and then trim. And I do that on the other two sides. And now you can see that this piece here that I had hanging off the edge is big enough to use for one of the other sections. Section number 1. We've got another 7 to go. So now we sew them into pairs. Sew 2 pairs together. And finally, the 2 halves of the block come together to make the final star. And of course, whilst it is for the Dear Jane quilt, there is absolutely no reason you couldn't make your own quilt with just these stars. Well, that's me done for today. Don't forget to check out the Dear Jane site that is down in the description below. After all, it's offered for free, which is a very rare thing these days. And until I see you next time, have a good time.